Okay, Americans go on a lot about China, but China does not own the US. China just owns our debt paper. If our national debt was to go south, then China would not own squat. What would they do? Repossess the treasury? Yeah, well, be real. Forget China, folks. And forget the national debt. What is it now? 12 trillion? Who can we squeeze for that much money? Anybody? It gets pretty academic. As long as creditors like China are happy to buy our treasury bills, then there's no problem. It's when they're not happy and stop buying that there's a problem. This happened with the Japanese during the Reagan years. Japan bought massively into the U.S. debt. But then very stupidly, the American Treasury Department under Secretary James Baker created something called the Plaza Accord in 1985. This was with Japan and Germany. It was meant to usher in an orderly depreciation of the dollar to increase U.S. exports. The Plaza Accord was a disaster on most fronts. One of those fronts was that Japan now faced the prospect of being paid back on its U.S. treasuries in devalued dollars, which killed a lot of the incentive to buy more treasuries, believe me. It makes for interesting reading in the 5th and 6th chapters of a book called The Weight of the Yen by an investment banker named R. Taggart Murphy. But my only point citing the Reagan years is that if a superpower is going to spend itself beyond its wildest dreams, it had better get a naive sugar daddy like Japan to foot the bill. And that superpower better not do anything to undermine the relationship. These days our sugar daddy is China, but then China is not so naive as Japan. China has its own agenda, which is to keep the US dollar strong by buying up just enough treasuries as might be necessary to keep Chinese exports cheaper than US exports. Of course, China has a cheaper labor pool to begin with, a desperately cheaper labor pool that includes prison slave labor. Just as many workers' dormitories in China resemble quarters more suited to prisons than what Americans would call dormitories. So there's that as well. China also plays games to keep its currency artificially weaker than it really objectively is. Buying into the U.S. debt is just one element to the overall strategy. They have all angles covered. So, not so naive at all. In any case, at this point, China is as mobbed up with the dollar as any other major player on the world financial market. Which is why none of these players, friends or competitors alike, would care to see the U.S. fail. Which is why, even with a debt of some $16+ trillion, the U.S. has yet to fail and will not fail. When we go down, everyone else goes down with us. That's how it works. So nobody wants to be down. We're all on the same hole. And if we climb out more or less at the same pace, we're all going to be okay. Okay, it's all relative. There's all kinds of ideologies out there to the right that insist that it isn't relative, that it's absolute, that we have to go back to the gold standard. Good luck on that. It ain't going to happen. So in the meantime, what about the reality of the situation as it stands? And that reality is the strong dollar, it helps us. It's better than a dollar that's completely been spent into oblivion. So there's that plus side. But we are not the masters of our own currency anymore. And that's a bad situation, and it will hurt us with trade. It is hurting us, and it could kill us. Okay? So it's very important to get the debt in order. But what's more important is recovery. And recovery is not the same thing as getting the debt in order. President Herbert Hoover thought it was back in the day, 1929, the crash of 1929, and he was wrong, and people who still talk like that to this day are wrong. And that includes people in the Eurozone who talk this way. It's the recovery that can't wait, okay? Currently, in this very new year of 2013, interest on treasuries is low, the creditors are still buying, and the exchange rate with the euro and other currencies is stable. That's the bottom line. And so we've got this thing called the fiscal cliff over here, and that's a deadline. So if we cannot cut spending and cut the deficit in some kind of sensible, rational, reasonably humane way than we're going to do it in a completely irrational, crazy meat axe way, where we just cut across the board. You know, the Pentagon and entitlement programs just slash, 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 blindly. Okay, terrible for our local economy, but it will keep up with your guys' austerity programs. Keeping up with the Germans. We've had our deadline come and go and have an extension now of 2 months. We had a very tiny little fiscal cliff deal where Obama got most of his way about the revenue side of all of this, taxing the rich and all of that. And of course, it's completely misleading to say it's just taxing the rich. It's taxing everybody. Every dishwasher, janitor, and waitress out there is going to be paying more in Social Security because the payroll tax holiday, so-called, that was instituted in 2010 has expired, and they didn't bother to renew it. And that's going to cost Obama and the Democrats dearly in terms of popularity. It couldn't have gone on much longer. They just did that as a temporary thing to stimulate the economy, but now, because of the fiscal cliff thing, perfectly ordinary people are going to see less in their paychecks, and the mean average income, you know, that's going to be a loss in pay of like $83 or so a month. And, you know, people aren't stupid. Their paychecks are going to be $83 less this month than they were last month. They're certainly going to feel misled. I am not happy about the payroll tax holiday being lifted in this shaky recovery that we're in. There's no way that the left is happy about that. We feel sold out by Obama, but that's nothing new. It's all going to come back to haunt us when we have to deal with the spending issues and what to cut for spending. And Republicans and Democrats never see eye to eye as to what to cut, all right? So it's cats and dogs and more uncertainty for the markets. Today, January 2nd, 2013, as I'm sitting here, the markets have responded very positively to the fact that there was a little deal and a little extension to the cliff and everything is okay. But in 2 months' time, a lot comes due. We have to raise our, what we call our debt ceiling. We always spend beyond our means for the year. Thank you, Tea Party. Now, there are some people, Americans, who are watching this video who are sympathetic to the Tea Party up to a degree. They're libertarian type guys. And I say to you guys, I understand your sympathies and concerns, and something has to be done about the debt. I don't think it has to be done overnight. This is all strictly about keeping up with the currencies in Europe. It's all relative, and that's the whole game right there, is the purchasing power of the currency. And there is no other real issue to any of this. We're not talking about a household budget. And will we ever come to an understanding? You know, we'll come to some kind of understanding. It's not going to be catastrophic. It's not going to be the end of the economy one way or another, because there will be a deal. But this debt ceiling thing is very dangerous. If the Tea Party succeeds in doing what it did last year, in delaying the debt ceiling, and Europe sees that, you know, a second time, you know, 2 times in a row with the debt ceiling, you're talking about a depression level financial crisis. You're talking about everybody abroad freaking out about the Americans, and have they got their act together over there?
Giving their blood.